All right, I'm going to hold down Shift and put these all back at 0.5 here, so we're back to our sphere. So let's go back here. So we've already talked about primitive type 1, which again, 2 axes at the same time. And then primitive type 2, which is a super quadratic, which is 2 axes, 2 alternating axes for different shapes. We go to primitive type 3, that's going to immediately at 0.5 and 0.5 put us at a cylinder. So we take this inside one, this inside one's going to be a taper, and this outside one's going to be our quadratic. So again, at 0.5, from this angle is a circle, from this angle is a square. If we change this outside one all the way to 1, this one's a diamond, this one's a square. Go all the way to 0, this one's a square, and this one's a square. And again, this one here is just going to either taper from one side or the other, depending on the position. So if we set this all the way to 0, we'll get a cone, and then we can either change that to whatever. So this is a cone with a circle back, this is a cone with a rectangle back, and this is a cone with a diamond back. So you can see we're basically just tapering one side and maintaining this shape that we originally had. So you can use this to dial in whatever shape you want with whatever taper that you want. And again, if we go back to 0.5, or back to our cylinder that we started with. And one thing I should mention while we're in here, this primitive axis right here, if you don't want this cylinder pointing right at you, you can go through here and you can change this, 0.3, it's this blue cone right here. You can change the axis to X, Y, or Z, but we'll just go ahead and leave that alone for now. And one last primitive type, let's go ahead and hit Control N, and we're set at 0.5 for both of these modifiers right here. If we go to primitive type 3 and change it to primitive type 4, you're going to see everything disappears, and that's because primitive type 4 is a torus. So what I'm going to have to do is on this new surface at 0, it's not able to project anything. If I scale it down, it'll start projecting in, and now it'll start projecting out, so you can kind of see that torus. But let's go ahead and leave it this size, and then we'll go back to our new surface, and we'll change that to 1. And now you can see the full torus in its full glory. We still have 2 modifiers here. We have an inside and an outside modifier, both set to 0.5. If we drag this one in, this one's going to be the radius of the torus, so we can go from a thin torus to a thick torus. And then this outside one is going to go from kind of a washer shape or a cylinder with an interior radius to one that has sharper edges on it. And again, it's doing it from both sides, so we got 2 axes going here. So you can dial in if you want it to go from a super sharp transition or kind of soften those edges here. Let's go ahead and turn off polyframe so you can see that a little bit better. Oh, so when we have polyframe off, you can see the shape better. So with polyframe on, you're always going to see the polyframe. If you turn polyframe off, it's going to go from polyframe while you're manipulating the sliders to your shape. If you don't want to see these polyframes show up when you're manipulating the sliders, all you have to do is turn off line and turn off fill on your polyframe options. And now when you move this thing around, those lines and polyframes won't show up. Of course, if you want to see the lines, you can just turn on line, and now you'll just see the lines but no poly grouping.